You know what's sexy? Closing $1 million contract. That's sexy.
Welcome to Not Another CEO podcast. I'm your host, David Politis. Every week, we talk to inspiring leaders and get the true stories, the ups and downs, the lessons learned, and come away with actionable advice for our own journeys. Today's guest is a serial founder with a track record of building category-defining SaaS companies. He co-founded OneLogin, one of the first cloud-based identity and access management providers. After exiting OneLogin, he took a short break, but not for long. In 2022, he launched Bunny, a billing platform optimized for B2B SaaS, including quoting, revenue recognition, analytics, and everything else you need in a billing platform. The idea came from firsthand pain he felt at OneLogin. Unlike OneLogin, where he raised $175 million, he has decided to bootstrap Bunny. He's originally from Denmark, ran OneLogin while living in California, and is now coming to us today from a boat in the Mediterranean. Please welcome co-founder and CEO of Bunny, Thomas Pedersen.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to be doing this. I know you don't do a lot of these podcasts, so I'm really excited that you're doing this with me. All right, jump right into it. What is the one thing you've done at Bunny, big or small, that's had the biggest impact, and you'd absolutely do again if you're CEO of another company in the future?
Yeah, so this is not very profound, but it really makes a big difference. Companies are all about the people. And when you start your first company, you're hiring a bunch of people that don't work out. So the second time around, you kind of know, a lot of people. And we've been lucky to bring over a bunch of engineers that we knew and trusted from OneLogin. And that just makes a huge difference in terms of we know their strengths and weaknesses. They know us. There's a lot of high level of trust, and we can execute really fast.
How many people would you say? I mean, how big is Bunny today, people-wise?
We're still a small team. We're 7 people.
And how many of the people came from OneLogin?
We brought 5 over, and then we met one other guy, and so that's where we at.
One of the things, because I've talked to some other founders who, I mean, myself having been through this, you kind of think to yourself, man, I wish I could go bring that team back together, all those great people, all of that. One of the concerns I have when I think about my next business and how to do that is those people are at a different stage of their lives, let's say, or their careers, and they may need things that they didn't need before comp. Things like how do you think about? Does that make what I'm asking make sense? Like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, a bunch of the people we brought in at the entry level in non-engineering roles, they've kind of, they're way further in their careers now, and we don't have anything to offer them. But engineers are a little bit different because there's a lot of people who are just individual contributors for life. That's what they like to do. They like writing code. They have that entrepreneurial spirit. And those are the people we brought over. But there are people that were in customer success and marketing and so on that we can't access at this point. We also don't need them yet, but we would have to hire. Maybe we'll hire them as managers as at some point, and they will bring in people that they trust and know how to work with.
Yeah, because one of the things, I mean, at least from what I know of OneLogin, obviously we knew each other well in a similar space. What I know of the culture, I have a feeling. I have a feeling you probably have a lot of people asking you, "Can I, like, hey, you need a head of sales? You need that's my assumption just based on what I know of the culture, and so that's kind of why I'm, it's like how do you even select those people? There's probably a lot of people waiting, like wanting to get hired.
It's kind of interesting because, at some point now we've kind of been into Bunny a few years. People start coming out of the woodworks. And sometimes when they're looking for a job, right, they can just see the timing. Oh, that's what you want to meet. But there are definitely people I think I can pull, out of a current job when we need them, because I think we had a really good culture at OneLogin. And I've had a lot of people come back either directly or through other people saying, that was like the best job I had. Learned so a lot because I think, and you can probably relate to this, it was a grind. And so you create some strong bonds with your colleagues when you have that kind of environment, and you also learn a lot. Like, it wasn't just a huge tailwind. Like, it wasn't easy for us. It was a lot of work.
I actually think, when you say, I think that the grind that is where you build better, stronger bond than if it's so easy. And so, I for a long time I became kind of obsessed with Everest, not me climbing Mount Everest, just the idea of like, and reading about all the people who've climbed it. And a lot of people talk about how it's like in the tough camps, camp 2, camp 3, that's actually where they build these relationships and their own skills. And so when you say that, I actually think the people have been through those grinds, and the businesses that are like that, as painful in the time, in the moment that it is, those are the bonds that people actually look back. Remember when we did this and we had this issue, and then those are the people that really want to come back and do it again with each other.
Yeah. I mean, the people you only high five, you don't really get to know them that well. But when you patch on the people's wounds and, treated their trauma, that, you know them at a different level.
Yeah. Well, the one person who you is the same as OneLogin and to Buddy is your brother. So you're co-founder in both of the businesses. Can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe we can go to the OneLogin to start. Like at OneLogin, was that an obvious thing to start it with him? Did you always know that you wanted to do things together? Back in those days.
Yeah, we are 3 years apart. I'm the older, and we were both in software. I got him. He actually studied to become an electrician, and then he got tired of that and said, "Well, you should learn some Perl." And that was back in the 90s when everybody was building websites. So he got into Perl, and then he started making a career, and he had a little web agency as well. And then when I moved to the US in 2004, we became really close. It was like, I wouldn't say we were close, but not super, super close in Denmark. And we maybe see each other once a month, even though we live very close to each other in Copenhagen. And then he started coming over every 3 months. And that was just about the time when, Facebook came around and Ruby on Rails became a thing, and Zendesk started building their product. And I knew those guys. And I was like, yeah, I want to start a company as well. And it'll be great if I could do it with my brother. So I kept throwing ideas at him, and he was like, I don't know, this is a bad idea. Some of the ideas are just lame. And over time, your ideas just get better and better. And he had worked at a consulting company in Denmark that did remedy implementations. Actually, it was run by Mikkel Svane, who later started Zendesk, which is why he started Zendesk, because remedies just sucked. And so I was helping out at Zendesk at the time, like very, very early on in 2009, or maybe it was 2008. And we had customers who were like, now this is a great app, but now I have another set of credentials and users to manage. Like, okay, I should build a solution for that. And so my brother had experience with Active Directory because everybody wanted to think they users from AD. I'm sure did the same thing with Better Cloud. So, okay, that's a good idea. So then we decided to build a prototype, and that was maybe the fifth idea that I came up with. And that's kind of the way it works with us. If I want an idea shut down, I just run by him because he most likely will. So if he greenlights it, there's something there.
And then so you both exited from OneLogin, and then when you were building Bunny, did you immediately go back to him and start throwing ideas? Like, was it the same thing over again, or you already knew at that point we're going to do another thing together? Or how did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I knew pretty much right away. He hung around at OneLogin a little bit longer than I did, and because he was still able to add value per his knowledge of the product and infrastructure. I was just like a figurehead at the end. So I started running ideas by him again, and I basically said, I don't want to start another company unless you're with me.
And how is that to be together, doing that together? I mean, I have a sister. I don't have a brother. I've got two sons though, who are a couple of years apart. On one hand, I dream of them being in business. Like literally, when you tell me these stories, I dream of them doing this, and then sometimes I'm like, they will not make. If they do this, I don't know. If they'll make it through together. How is that relationship, and how does that how do you divide responsibilities? It's very clear, what everyone's responsible for. Because I think at OneLogin, you kind of maybe alternated or changed jobs, kind of throughout the years?
Well, that was more because we brought in a CEO, so then I became CTO, and so we found a new role, like just a title, but he basically did the same thing. Um, we're both technical, but we have different technical skills. I would say I'm more focused on the business side and product design and product vision, and UX and those types of things. He is more, platform security, scalability, like the deeper level stuff. So if there's something, I remember at OneLogin when we found out, because we didn't know this when we started OneLogin, that there was something called SAML. So I said, this SAML thing, can you figure out how it works? So he got to work and figured it out. But that's kind of the way it works. Like he's more hardcore than I am.
Got it. Now you're building Bunny, I would say, in many ways differently than you built OneLogin, many different ways. One of the ways, clearly, I mean, everyone can see your background and where you are. You were in person for OneLogin,
Yeah.
and you're clearly remote for Bunny. Did the in person for OneLogin, was that not important? Was that not important this time? Did it not work that time? Like, why do it so differently? As it relates to the location of you and the team.
Um, it's more, I think, because we can. When we started OneLogin, we were based out of Santa Monica. And when we raised our Series A round from Charles River Ventures, and they said, well, here's some money, but you have to build out sales and marketing in San Francisco. So for the next 6, 7 years, I commuted to San Francisco every single week. I've flown Virgin America on that stretch 500 times at least. And so this time around, where I'm not looking for venture capital, where anyone's telling me how I can build a company, now I can do a little bit differently. Plus, the people that we hired are in different locations in New Zealand, Mexico, the Bay Area, and I've kind of lived between Europe and the US. And I think it works fine for engineering. I think there comes a day when we build out sales and marketing. I think those people benefit more from being in person. But on the engineering side, it could totally work. I actually think it works better in many aspects.
Hmm. So you were commuting every week?
Yeah. Yeah. I had a work apartment first in Telegraph Hill, because we were in Osgood in like the dinkiest office, right in the same building as Unity. And then later we moved to Spear Street, and I got an apartment in by Moscone Center. So I would fly up Monday, and I was divorced and I had 2 small kids. So it was important for me to get back and see my kids every week. So I would be there 4 days a week in the beginning, Monday to Thursday 1 week, and then Tuesday to Friday the next week. And I'll come home and have my kids for 5 days and then go down and do it again. And yeah, it was a lot.
Do you believe that the business was, you and I have never actually talked about this. When we talked to CRV, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this. We talked to them, and they were very interested in investing, and they told me that we were in Atlanta and New York at the time for Better Cloud, and they told me that they were interested, but only if we moved the company to San Francisco, because we wouldn't be able to build a business like this not in San Francisco.
Right. Yeah, and I think that was definitely the thinking back then. Zendesk first moved to Boston because that's where CRV was, and then Benchmark said when they did the B round, no, you have to move to San Francisco. So go figure, right? There was a bigger dog in that room after the B round, and I think obviously the Bay Area is still the capital of tech, but I think there's more options these days, and especially if you're not venture backed. I think COVID has changed a lot of people's minds. So it's this whole thing about Silicon Beach. Some people talk about that in LA where I am. I don't think it's a thing, but it's definitely a lot more opportunities to build a SaaS company outside of the Bay Area now. Also, technology is much better. Like look at us, we're sitting here, like perfect. Yeah, I'm installing the internet right now, and it works pretty great. Right, good. Yeah.
I mean, look, I actually, I have met founders now from so many different, building businesses out of so many different places. And I would make an argument that just for the pure cost of talent, it's actually better not to do it in the Bay Area, because I think at some point it becomes really hard to build a truly profitable,
Yeah.
scalable company with all of your talent there physically.
Yeah, it was really tough back then because there was so much competition. So everybody's fighting the talent. It's impossible to get in your office space. It's 5 or 7 year leases at super high rates. When Zendesk came to San Francisco in 2009, I think they got an office on down on Townsend, and it was $7 per square foot. The last lease we got was something like $85 per square foot within 10 years. That is crazy. I think rates have come down a little bit lately, and you can get better deals now, but it's very capital intensive to scale in the Bay Area.
Yeah. I went to one office. I'll never forget. This founder invited me to his office, and it was the nicest office. It was one of the nicest offices I've ever been to. Company losing money, had raised hundreds of millions, and he showed off his view of whatever. And he told me very proudly, we pay $140 a square foot. I was like, well, I don't know if that's we should be telling people.
We got a great sublease, fully furnished. I think definitely not even $60. I think in the 40s maybe. It was awesome. Good deal.
Another way that you are doing this very differently is that you are not raising, or have not, at least to this point, raised venture capital.
Yeah.
I assume that that's very purposeful and deliberate.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that? Because you raised a lot of money and you built OneLogin into a big business with that money.
Yeah.
And now you're choosing to do it a very different way.
Yeah. I think also it was necessary with OneLogin. We had a really strong competitor in Okta, as you remember, and they were, when we had raised our seed round, I think we raised $150,000. They announced a $10 million A round, so we were on a back foot already. It's not like a 2 hours race in the space we're in. Billing has been around for a long time. There's just a lot of old players in the space, and that's why we decided to go into that space. Plus, there's so many SaaS companies, there's room for a vertical play. We did a small friends and family round. Just we had people asking us if they could invest. So we said, okay, we'll do a round, but we're mostly financing it ourselves. We burn through that money pretty fast. Yeah.
And what do you think is the biggest difference that you've noticed already between fundraising kind of day one and constantly fundraising versus the way you're doing it right now?
If there's one thing I love more in the world than anything, like cocktails and pizza or anything, it's not having board meetings. Oh, I love it so much. And so, because there's a lot of pressure when you have big money in, and you start making more short-term decisions. And because every quarter, right, you what's the quarterly number gonna be? And I really don't miss that part. It's super stressful, and I never got much value out of board meetings. I came out of them feeling deflated, so I need like a day to recover after that. Yeah. It comes with the investment, of course, but I definitely don't miss that. So now we can kind of take on time, and back then people didn't really talk about PMF or product market fit, but that's a big thing now. And there's a really big difference between when you think you have product market fit and when your customers tell you have product market fit. Someone posted on LinkedIn the other day, like 10 signs you have PMF, and they were really good. And I recognize some of those signs, and we've been able to take our time to get the product to where it needs to be. And that's been a really, it's still longer than we expected, but I think it's for the better.
I really like that. When you think you have product market fit versus when you actually have product market fit. That's a really, I actually not thought about. That's a really interesting. And when you have the venture money, you let's say, I want to be careful how you kind of forced to feel like you have product market fit before,
Yeah.
sometimes maybe before you actually have it.
Yeah. And you're forced, well, you're not forced, but you're prone to making some,
Not
yeah,
forced.
you sometimes choose to make some short-term decisions. And for instance, at OneLogin, there was so much pressure on feature development because we were fighting for every deal with Okta. And we were very good at coming up with new functionality to sell, but we accrued some tech debt that really impacted developer happiness, which is a huge thing in kind of attracting and retaining talent and also executing, because at some point that tech debt just weighs you down. And that's the thing we have overemphasized on at Bunny, based on all the experiences. Like, we really kept the stack very clean, and it's made a huge difference.
Yeah, I think especially in the early days, having been through it myself as well, in the early days, those board meetings um, can drive you, to do some things maybe unnaturally, that you're trying to show customers momentum, and it makes sense, right? Like you said, they gave you money, they got to show return for the money. But in those early days, I talked to another founder the other day. He did raise a lot of money, but it's his multi-time founder, and he said, I realized we're going in the wrong direction. And earlier in my career, I would have just continued to go in that direction because the board and the this and my team. He's like, this time I knew I didn't have product market fit, and I just stopped everything, cut this entire thing, and restarted with this new idea, same company, And he said, but I would never do that as a first time founder because the pressure is too, you feel like I pitched them. I told them an idea. They invested in that idea. The idea is stupid, but I should keep doing the idea because that's what I told them, And I think that's a lesson I've been trying to pull from these interviews for people, because I think that that's really important. Like, you're the CEO, you're the founder, what's happening, and if you really take the step back, and again, it's easy to say all this now, right? When you have 10 million, 50 million, whatever it is, and the board meeting every quarter. And what do you think is the thing that is the hardest about bootstrapping that you didn't expect to be hard? Or surprise, let me say.
Well, I mean, you have money going out of your bank account every month on top of your own living expenses, and when you've had an exit, you don't live cheaper than before you had an exit. And so there's definitely a strain on the wallet. But I would say, when you have venture capital, you spend the money a little bit easier. You buy more expensive stuff, you hire more frivolously, you don't fire as fast. You tend to throw people at the problem. And one thing we've done at Bun is, like, we got to automate. And I think we can go for quite a while with the current team we have. The next hire we're going to bring on board is not going to be an engineer. It'll be someone to support customers, so that we don't have to do that out of the engineering team. But I'm going to try to hire as few people as possible and just make this, just producing a lot of cash. That's a fun the intellectual challenge here.
Yeah. One other thing that you're doing very differently this time than last time that I noticed, it's one of the reasons I reached out to you, is I feel like you were, let's say, relatively quiet, at least you personally, at OneLogin. You were not out there and beating your chest and talking. I mean, generally speaking, you weren't doing that, but you're doing more, not beating your chest, actually very thoughtful. I find your LinkedIn posts, I've been reading them for the last however many months, and that's why I reached out. I find that you've been sharing a lot more than I've ever seen you share before. Where does that come from? Did that just click? Did you do, is that for marketing? Is that because it feels like some of the more authentic things I've read, on LinkedIn, and very, like, I mean, really, I feel them coming from, like, real experience, which of course is what this whole Not Another CEO is about. So can you talk a little bit about why you started to do that now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not the one to get up on the soapbox. That's not my comfort zone. But I think I've learned a lot during OneLogin. And a lot of people have asked me about that period, like they really want to hear it. So I thought, okay, maybe I'll start writing a little bit about it. And as you get more engagement, you become more emboldened. And then there's also the other thing. Marketing has changed dramatically. When we started OneLogin, we would buy some AdWords and do some SEO and so on. That stuff is just dead. Like email is dead. And so now we're trying to build you know, build up my persona on LinkedIn, and it's already paying off. I'm getting a lot of inbounds from people who read it, and that's a way to kind of break through the noise.
Yeah. Well, I guess for you, because of what you're doing, your customer, I guess your customer is the early founder, right? I mean, I assume the person who's building a company and they're like, how do I do billing?
And a bunch of other things as well. And I would say, and we talked there's a little bit about this in our prep call. There are so much content shared on LinkedIn about these high flying companies. Oh, the top 20 or top 10, this is what they did. Yeah, that doesn't apply to you and me and a bunch of other people. Like, hear about some hard problems, some real hard problems. That's what most founders should learn from. They shouldn't look at what Slack did or Zoom did or something like that. Most of those companies today, luck has a lot to do with it. They were just there at the right time with the right product, and then it just took off, and a bunch of people just rode that tailwind.
That's why I love it. And I told you, yes, I did tell you that. That's why I love it, because I feel like there's so much there's these stories that set the wrong expectations for the next generation of founders. And they say, oh, I'm going to go from zero. I'm not making this up. I had someone come in to pitch me something, and one of their slides, they have nothing. They don't have a product. And they actually, one of the slides said, and we have direct visibility to becoming a decacorn. I said, you can't put that in your slide. He's like 24 years old, and he was serious. Like, it was a serious slide. And I said, you can't put that in the deck. I mean, I can't even take that, but the problem is, it's like you look at one company and they've gone from 0 to 100 million in 2 months, and AI, this thing or whatever. And everyone reads that and it's like, that's it. No more employees, 2 people. We're going to get to 100 million in 6 months. And so I think the true stories of what the masses, the real majority of founders go through is important, because actually, if you hear it, some people may not choose to go. It's not that glamorous. It kind of sucks.
Yeah, no, it's not. Yeah.
So one of the things that I do want to say one thing, because you talked about the ads and stuff. I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you remember this, but years ago when Okta was doing their conference, Octane, in California, in San Francisco, I remember that you bought billboards all surrounding Moscone, OneLogin, like billboards. It was the best campaign I had ever. You remember this campaign or no? That was that campaign. To your point about marketing and everything, I was like, I remember coming out of Moscone, it was just like a billboard and then another one lost. Like the whole thing. I don't know. Anyway, I love that. Was that you, or was that a CMO or something that came up with that?
I can't remember what year that was. I definitely remember the event. I'm not sure that was a good investment, but
but it did stand out. I mean, it did stand out.
It was the right venue to do it.
It was the right venue to do it. So one of the things is, you clearly, like, you are all about B2B SaaS. I mean, whether building, identity and access management, building billing, all of that. What draws you to this problem, to this space?
I've just always like solving business problems. I started my first company with a buddy when I was 17. And that was when Denmark, they deregulated radio station licenses, and all of a sudden there were hundreds of radio stations. So I think we talked to some guys that had a local radio station in the city where I was born. And they were like, oh, we track all these records and we have to report royalties and so on. And I was like, oh, we can build that. So we actually built the solution for that and started selling to these radio stations. I think we got less than 10 customers, but no, it was a good experience. And then, I I never took, in Denmark, you can get like a stipend from the government for 5 years while you're studying. I never took that. I could make my own money writing software. And it was just a challenge to solve an actual business problem. And I don't really relate so much to other consumers. Plus, consumer is a kind of hit business. It's really difficult to get scale, but you can always kind of squeeze the money out of a business. And so at bigger scale, like OneLogin, it's really about the teamwork. I'm sure you had the same experience at Better Cloud. There are customers where, a bunch of people from the company have to work together for a long time to get that new client. And it kind of their sense of achievement and pride from that is just something that the team can live on for a long time. And that's what I love about B2B. And plus, many of your customers become friends like you, because you also go through some tricky stuff together. And again, that's kind of what creates a bond. So I just love that whole experience, and I wouldn't do anything else.
Yeah. For me, I started my career at Vocalosity, which was a B2B PBX phone system. And then I thought that I wanted to get into consumer apps and tech because I thought it was sexier, you know? But then you realize exactly what you said. It's like, it's a hit business. It's kind of like hitting the lottery, right? To build a consumer app, something that you need millions of people. I mean, basically, or at least hundreds of thousands to be using it, and they're not going to pay. And if they pay, maybe they'll pay you $9 a month or whatever. But when you can solve a problem for a business,
You know what's sexy? Closing $1 million contract. That's sexy.
you're right. You're right. It's a really interesting, when you say that also about becoming, I feel like, especially for what you're doing now, I don't know, but I feel this is like billing is something that's a pain in the ass. I've been through it. I think it is a pain in the ass, but it is the most important thing to work perfectly because it's the way you collect your money. And so I can imagine that this is an area where you actually solve this problem for a founder easily, simply. And that for them is like becomes core infrastructure for maybe forever.
Yeah.
For as long as they're running the company.
Yeah. I think if you can get into a company with billing and it just works, then it's really hard to replace you. It's when you screw up. My brother and I used to joke about, people get really upset when they can't sign into the applications, because single sign-on is down. But if you mess with the customers, with people's money, they get even more upset. But if it works, then you can have very high renewal rates. At OneLogin, even though we added more and more components to it, it was kind of a little bit abstract for most people. Identity and access management, what does that mean? But single sign-on, that's what people could understand. With billing, there's so many things to talk about because it's not just billing. It's about salespeople and customers and renewals and profit margins and, the whole accounting side. There's all the analytics and so on. So there's just so much it's a much bigger story. It's much more interesting, I think, to be honest.
What I want to go to the OneLogin days. How did you get the first customers? I only ever asked you, like, how did you find those first 5 customers, 10 customers? Like, were they just people you knew or cold call? How did you get them?
So, the thing about single sign-on is if you don't integrate to anything, it doesn't do anything. So what we would do is we would get the companies we integrated with to write a blog post about the integration. And this was even before SAML was a thing. And because most of the SaaS companies at the time didn't support SAML, it was Salesforce and WebEx and the big ones, because in order to use SAML, you need to have like an identity product from one of the big guys like IBM and Oracle and RSA. And so it didn't apply to startups. So what we did was we built these SAML toolkits in different languages, and we started pushing them to different SaaS vendors. And there were a few that picked them up because I had a customer who wanted it. And then we would use that customer to drive more integrations with other companies. And then it just became a snowball. And we had customers. I remember at one point we got Pandora Internet Radio as a customer, and they said, we're not buying any SaaS apps that don't support SAML. And so because it was such a big brand at the time, SaaS companies were eager to implement SAML so that they could get them as a logo. And so that really worked for us. And so we would kind of use some of our customers to put pressure on the SaaS vendors to get it done.
Interesting. And so you would go to, like, who was the first SaaS vendor you integrated with?
Oh, I can't remember. There were some that are not no longer around. I think Zendesk did it pretty early because we knew those guys.
So then so you would build they would build the SAML.
Yes. They would implement SAML in the product. We would create a connector in our catalog. And of course, now everybody who used OneLogin with Zendesk could eliminate all those passwords.
Right. And so then Zendesk would go and push, they would announce it.
Yeah.
You were using you were using the SaaS company to reach.
No, we were using our well, yeah, we would get reach through the SaaS companies, but then we would use our customers to put pressure on SaaS companies who didn't support it yet by saying, well, we're only going to buy your product if you work with OneLogin to implement it. And I think there's probably, I would guess, over 10,000 SAML connectors in OneLogin today. Yeah.
Wow.
So I really think
Cool.
we made a huge difference in driving that back then. Obviously, Okta helped a lot, but we were the ones who built the toolkits, who started pushing it early on, because we wanted to democratize it. We wanted to make sure that that everybody could benefit from SAML, even like a 5-person shop.
Um, and with Bunny, how have you gotten your first couple customers? Like how have you done that?
So that was mostly just companies we happened to run into. When we kind of thought we had PMF, we went live, and some people found us online, and we started to talk to them. And we found out, oh, we are still missing a lot of features. And then last year, we got a really valuable customer who became, I would say, more of a design partner, even though they're paying us. But they were running a very interesting business out of Europe, and they needed all these features for, discounts and pausing subscriptions and, annual adjustments and all kinds of stuff. So they really battle tested the product. And yeah, and then kind of the word gets out that we started using that as a case study. And again, I think LinkedIn is the best platform for outreach for me to get customers. If I reach out directly to someone who's like founder or CFO, it's not too hard to get a meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you say that about this customer being the design partner. I think back to the early days of all the companies I've been in, and those design partners have a huge impact. If you like go rewind all the way back and you're like, wow, the path we took was very much influenced
Yeah.
by actually just one or two. We had Netflix in the early days of Better Cloud, and I remember the conversations we had with them kind of directed where we went.
But it's really hard to get a design partner because why should this company waste their time on a product that may not work out? I just happened to meet another co-founder where we just clicked, and he was like, "Oh, I saw what you guys did at OneLogin, and we want to learn from that," and so on. And so they had experience with 2 other billing vendors. It was actually a migration project. So they've gone through a lot of billing pain, and it just kind of came together in a perfect way. And I wish every SaaS or every startup could find a customer like that, but it's really hard.
It is hard, but those people they do become kind of in some cases your friends, like you said, friends for life, especially the ones, what I find, I tell founders, I say, you want to find the design partner who wants to be there, like wants this almost as a part-time job because they want to see they want to be part of your success story, and they want to go and that's why I tell founders, like when you find that right design partner, they're a bigger fan of you than anyone. They're like going and cheering you on and but it is hard to find those, but when you find them, it's magic. I mean, I end up staying close with the guys from Netflix, they come with Costco, Netflix. I mean, all these companies for many years. And when they would tell you stuff later, well, we got bigger, we raised a lot of money, we had 2,000 customers. And then I would get the email or the text or the chat, and they'd be like, Dave, you fucked up this thing, whatever. And I'm like, Yep. Yep. We did. We did. That's, I need, I needed someone to tell me that.
Yeah. But it's better to have one customer that uses your product every single day, like a bunch of people use it, than having 50 people who sign in once a week or once a month. And I've talked to other startups that have that where they go, yeah, we have like 30 customers, but no one's like really in the product. And we have also customers who don't use it every single day, but the ones that do use it, that's where we learn so much. Like, but finding it is really, really hard. You have to get lucky.
How do you get that feedback? I know this is very tactical, but how do you go get that feedback from the people? Like, do you yourself do a standing call every week, every month?
No, no. They just tell us we need to do this. This is what we want to do. Like, hey, how do we give this, a discount, or hey, we want to increase prices by 5% this year, and we need to do it now. And hey, can we see our users revenue on top of the monthly recurring revenue? So they were just pushing us. We need all these things. And so we had like 6 months where we were just cranking out features really, really fast. And we got to a point where, okay, now we have to slow down a little bit so we can ensure code quality and everything. So we definitely have done that, but there was like 6 really intense months to catch up to what they needed to run their business.
Wow. 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 Let me ask you a question, which I ask every guest, which is, what is the biggest challenge you've ever faced at any of your companies, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah. So one concern that people always had with OneLogin was, we kind of holding the keys to the kingdom. So if because people sign into OneLogin, and then they sign into the apps from there. And the concern was if OneLogin gets breached, kind of like the world's your oyster for the hackers at least. And so one day during a board meeting, I got a Slack message from my brother saying, I think we have a security issue. And so for about an hour, I was getting live updates, and it turned out to be really serious. And so that was like what I feared the most. And it was a really scary moment. And once we kind of understood the situation on that first day, we knew that we had to go out immediately and announce it to our customers. I wrote a blog post about this maybe a month ago. So I immediately once we kind of understood the scope of it, of course, we didn't know how much data was taken, but some data was taken. I called our 10, 15 biggest customers directly and said, hey, there's going to be some news about this very soon. So we just want to give you a heads up, and we're on it. And, one of the CIOs said, oh, no one's ever done that before, and we were also about to close our single biggest deal with Airbus. It was like $1 million deal. So it was like, oh man, everything's just gonna fall apart. And so the next day we went live with it, and we immediately, got bombarded with the phone calls. So for the next many months, it was about we get drilled about what happened. And here's the thing: when you get interviewed by security teams, you can't lie to them. Like they will sniff it out if you're giving them, some kind of story. And so we just said, well, here's what happened, and here's what we're going to do. Give us a few days. We're going to come up with a plan. And so for I think probably the next 5, 6 months, we had follow-up calls with a bunch of customers about where we were in that process of fixing all these things. And some of the things took a long time to solve because of kind of architectural. But because we were so transparent about it, we actually lost very few customers in the process. We returned more employees, I would say, than we lost customers because it was very stressful for the employees. But that was really scary. I mean, it could have completely ended the company, and it didn't, which obviously was a huge relief. But we could have gone about it differently, and then it would have been over.
Wow. I mean, I remember it. I remember it being a big deal for everyone in the space, and everyone got real nervous about their own systems and platforms, and so from the moment in the board meeting when you found out till you kind of closed everything, how was that a year that it took to kind of do all that? 6 months? Like, how long was that open for? I guess.
I mean, I think since we have a subscription business, it's going to take a couple of years before you know the full impact. And we definitely had some customers that deflected, but it wasn't like, it was not even 5%. It was very few. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So we did the best we could. And again, it's about transparency. That's the other thing with B2B. Once the trust is gone, your customer is gone as well.
Mm. I think the lesson of transparency, I'm going to double down on this. I actually don't think I've had this conversation with a founder or with a CEO yet on the podcast. And I think many people face this not this situation, but a situation like this. And let me say for myself, in the beginning part of my career, when we had issues with our systems at Localocity, I would not want to write anything to the customers. I didn't want to put it out there, because I'm like, if I put it out there, the competitors are going to get it, and then they're going to say this thing, and then this. And then every time I didn't put it out, it ended up in 10x worse.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then when we got to Better Cloud, I told the person who's in charge of support, if we have the littlest incident, I want to tell everyone, that we're having a challenge and this is thing, and I want a page for status, and like, what you want to, this is going to cause more tickets. I said, I don't want the customer to tell me that they're having the problem when we already know, and we look stupid, but you do feel this thing of, you don't want to say that you messed. I mean, it makes sense. You care about the customer, you care about the brand, but you learn almost every time, right? I mean, Okta's had the incidents and they've not said anything for however many weeks or whatever it's been. And then they come out, right, for a month. And I think that it's I mean, I understand the psychology because I've been through it, but I think the lesson for people, for founders, is like, the customer trust is everything. And they will be pissed off. Not maybe, they will be pissed off, but at least they know that you're telling, they feel like you're going to be open with them. You're going to tell them when things happen. And what I find is most people don't really want to move off of the platform. If the platform works, you had an incident. Yeah. So does everyone else. So does Microsoft. So does Google. So does Salesforce. Like, you're gonna have, it's. I think that's a really important lesson.
Yeah, and we were one of the first to have a big incident, and then afterwards, later on, a bunch of other companies had breaches, and not everybody dealt with it with the same, transparency. That was very clear. And I would also say sometimes I run into people that are into conspiracy theories. Once you've had a security breach, I mean, you have to. You cannot keep something like that a secret. Like, if sooner or later it gets out, it just does. Disgruntled employee. I mean, something. I mean, it's just gonna happen. So you might as well just tell it right away, because it is gonna get out. And we were like, Okta was really competitive. They had a bunch of our competitors on speed dial. If we had some kind of like outage thing, hey, do you want to speak to Okta now? They were all over them. So going out with a security breach on it, it was pretty scary. Yeah.
All right, I want to transition a little bit more to your background in a second, but I want to just ask you, you fast forward 3 years from today. What does Bunny look like 3 years from today?
Yeah. Very profitable. We probably will have an office somewhere, probably in Los Angeles. There's right now we're doing billing, quoting, revenue recognition, SaaS metrics, and self-service and tenant provisioning. So it's kind of a mouthful, but there's so many things we can lay on top of it. Like, U.S. sales tax is really complicated, and if you want to buy that from Stripe, that's 0.5% of your revenue. And there is the contract language management, which is like a kind of very related to the whole coding part. And sales commissions are tightly tied to what you're doing on with the revenue. Like, we know we're the system of record for the subscription revenue. So there's so many things we can add on top of it. We're going to take our time. We want to make sure that obviously everything we're doing now works perfectly before we spend. But there's a lot of places we can go, and that's really exciting.
It's you're when you are the revenue, when you're the system of record, you do think about all these other point solutions where people have built pretty big SaaS companies for each of those point solutions.
Just think about commission, like huge companies came out of that.
Yeah.
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 And that's something that's super complicated to deal with because you've dealt with comp plans and so on. The sky's the limit when it comes to the imagination. So let's see about that one. But I think being the system of record gives you so many options because 10 years ago people would do best of breed. Like you start with CRM, maybe you get some billing, and now CPQ, and now you squeeze that in, bunch of integration, and you keep patching and patching, and the data is just in all these different silos. We've even had customers say, well, we would still like to invoice out of QuickBooks. Why on earth would you want to do that? Now you're going to start messing with the invoices in QuickBooks, and now you're messing up the revenue recognition. Like you want to stay within this box for the revenue. You can get read-only feeds, but this is where you manage it all because it's going to make your life a lot easier. So I'm super excited about that. And customers are kind of quickly coming on board when they understand what the guardrails will actually do for them.
I like that. All right, I want to transition a little bit more to your background. You talked about it before a little bit from Denmark. Obviously with your brother started these two companies, but was it like, and you had your first company when you were even younger, 17. Did you just grow up in an entrepreneurial family? Was that where this comes from? Did something happen in your childhood that kind of got you down this path? Like where does this come from?
So my dad, he had his own business. It was just him and one other person, and he was a screen printer. So, printing stickers and so on a cell screen. And it was up and down with that business. We had a comfortable night. We're not rich or anything, but we had, everything we needed. But there was one point where that was during the financial crisis in the, I think, 80s. And my parents were about to lose or close to losing their house. I remember one time my mom had to borrow money from me for food because I was making money writing software, and it was kind of weird. It was only maybe like $200, but still. And I was a teenager. And I remember that the letters from the IRS came in and they were just piling up, and my dad wouldn't open them. And I was like, why not opening the letters? That's just bad news. I'd rather not deal with it. So I was like, I'm never going to start a company myself. And then when I was 17, I started. And then, once I got my first computer, I just knew this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. So that changed quickly. And then I think what's so amazing about coding is you can build anything out of nothing. No raw materials. It's like writing a book. It's only your imagination that is the limit. You can build anything, and that is just so amazing.
Did you go to school, like computer science major or something? Or
yeah, I did start computer science at the University of Copenhagen, but after 6 months I started working full time because I'd read a bunch of the books already, and so I continued that for almost 2 years. I started working for this Danish software company, and one of the founders, he would drive into the university and drop off my assignments, so I could work more. And so after 2 years of that, I was like, oh yeah, this is not good. I don't need that. So then I dropped out.
What is in Denmark, like, is it in the culture, like, is entrepreneurship big? Is it, is it a big part, or is it, I don't know, culturally how that is?
Not really. It's a small country, pay a lot of taxes. So I live in California now. There's only one place where you pay more capital gains tax, and that's in Denmark. So I really optimized that move. So I would say there's less incentive for people to start to be entrepreneurs. But I think it's changed a lot over the past 10 years with successes like Zendesk and Basecamp. So there are hundreds of startups in Denmark now. But obviously the reward is bigger in the US because we have such a big country to sell it into. And also, and this is the biggest difference, American companies is more willing to give you a shot. Even with OneLogin, it's so hard to get Danish customers. Even though I was Danish, everybody was like, yeah, we normally buy Microsoft. I'm like, really? It was such a thing. Whereas in the US, everybody, people are like, dream of making it big, right? So when they see an entrepreneur, they can kind of like yeah, I want to give that guy a shot or that woman a shot. And that's the biggest difference between the US and Europe.
Mm, mm. Um, did you, speaking of this, I mean, did you have a mentor growing up that, as you were starting these companies, that you worked with, that officially, not officially, formally, do you have that?
I wouldn't say I had a mentor, but this company I joined just before I turned 20, this was back in the France Minitel days when they had these little 40 character terminals and you would dial up with a modem and so on. So they built software for that. And I worked there for almost 14 years. But at some point, we had built a solution for an internet service provider when that started becoming a thing. And then Cisco Systems saw it and they put in an investment. And all of a sudden, we were venture backed and we grew from 15 people to 400 in like very few years. And we're about to go public on the NASDAQ. But then 9/11 happened at the .com bust. So that company grew very fast and had international expansion. And I became, I would say, close with the two founders. They made me and one other guy a partner in the company when that started happening because we wanted to make sure that like we were the kind of the technical backbone of the company. And I was, they took me to investor meetings and I was participating, hiring
Wow.
people internationally and, going to the US. I've been to the US 50 times before I moved here on business. So I kind of like seen a lot of these scaling steps before. And I think that makes it a lot easier when you're doing it yourself because you kind of, I mean, it wasn't my responsibility, but I was observing on the sideline and sometimes in the middle of it for many years. So it seemed less daunting. Oh, you need to open an office in the US or hire a VP of sales. I met those people before, so it wasn't so daunting.
Mm. Someone said that to me in one of these interviews. They said, and Tony Safoyan from SADA. He was the founder of SADA
No,
Systems,
I
one of the
don't.
Google partners. Anyway, he was telling me how he's like, for him, it was as soon as he could see a person who had done it before, he then knew it was possible.
Yeah.
And it was just one person, just seeing one person do it that was close enough to him that he had that, then he's like, oh, I can do this. This is what it looks
Yeah.
like. And you're saying even deeper than that, right? Because you're kind of riding shotgun with them through that journey.
Yeah, and it's really interesting you say that because knowing what good looks like makes such a difference. So we were selling to phone companies like ISPs. So it was like, Belgacom in Belgium, and we sold to China and Thailand and so on. And we had like big RFPs, like 50, 100-page RFPs with hundreds of requirements, long implementation cycles. And so it was really enterprise, like multi-million-dollar deals. And so when you kind of been through that, it's like, yeah, the complexity is not really scary. And I've seen several people like lead different roles, and they're okay. This person was definitely better than the one we had before, right? So now you know what good looks like, and that makes a huge difference.
What is it that drives you and motivates you deep down? What is where does that come from, that drive?
I grew up with the Legos, one of the few international known Danish products, and we would build everything out of Legos. Every month there was a new theme, like power chips, trains, tanks, boats, and you name it. And so with Lego, again, you can build anything you want. So I guess I just always had like the urge to build. And
To
yeah,
build.
and I would say back to what I mentioned before, I wanted to be a chef originally when I was up till I was 13, but then I got my first computer. And when I put my hands on that keyboard, so that kind of tactile feeling of typing, I just knew I love this. And then I would say maybe a year after I got it, I started programming, and then I just never stopped.
Okay, last question for you. Knowing everything you know today, all the experiences you've had, you can go all the way back to the beginning of your career before you started your first job and give yourself one piece of advice. What would that be?
Yeah, you touched on a little bit before about mentors. I would say we all have our strengths and weaknesses, and the seven deadly sins. Mine is definitely the pride. I'm not very good at asking for help. And so sometimes when I probably shouldn't ask for help, or there's someone that could have taught me how to do something or give me feedback, I could have benefited from it greatly. But it's just not really in my DNA or my upbringing to, I'm gonna like power through this and figure a way myself. And I know other founders who've been very good at surrounding themselves with advisors and mentors, but we not everyone is the same. But that's probably one thing I could have done. I could have saved some trouble there. Yeah. Did you have mentors?
I did. I had, yeah, well, really for me, it was my father, for most of my kind of upbringing and even my first job. And just, he had small businesses himself and he would give me advice and everything. And then, at Vocalocity, a guy came in as an independent board member. His name is John Hallett. And he had run a couple of his own businesses, started a company, and he became our independent. And it was really at that moment, he really kind of leveled me up as it related to being in a venture-backed company and how to go to board meetings and how to present and how to, build the team and how to do metrics and KPIs. And then he was actually the CEO of Cloud Sherpas, and he recruited me to Cloud Sherpas. And then he was the exec chairman of Better Cloud. And so kind of through all those steps, he was, he had seen a lot himself as an operator, but then also as an investor and as a board member. And, I think, to your point, it's the thing about asking. I don't think I'm very good at asking for the help, but after a while, when I started getting the help, and it was that he would give me advice, and I was like, "No, I know how to do it. And then he would give me the advice, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to try it, and then it would work, and then it would work the second time and the third time, and by the fourth time, I'm like, I'm just going to call John, like, and ask, and
Yeah.
so, that, to be honest, that's what I've tried to model myself after for the businesses that I work with today and that I advise. And it's, how do you shorten the learning curve? How do you just help someone avoid that big, I mean, you've now been through it, so you kind of have all those scars, but I think sometimes you don't need the scars. I mean, of course, when you have your own scars and the pain, it's going to be more acute, but that, I think there is an opportunity to shorten that and to remove some of those.
It'd be nice to have fewer scars. I wouldn't mind that. But I think a little bit with a real mentor, like a long-term mentor, just like a design partner, they kind of have to pick you than you picking them, because it's a lot about chemistry. Like, you're not willing to take advice from everybody. You have to be a certain understanding there. And then I think there's a lot of mentors that don't know they're mentors, but they're just people observing them, like, oh, you're doing it this way, or this is how you're handling that situation. So they're learning from it that way. But actually having like regular meetings and talking face on, I never had that type of mentor.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. No, actually, no one has said that. I think that's good advice of asking for help. So, well, Thomas, thank you. This was amazing. I'm really happy that you did this with me and you agreed to do this with me. There's a lot of real talk in this conversation that I think people will learn from. So, thank you.
Yeah, it was fun. I was looking forward to it, and good to see you again.
Awesome. Well, for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. If you did, please share this with your networks, and we'll see you for the next episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. That's a wrap for this week's episode of Not Another CEO Podcast. Thanks for joining. For show notes and more, please visit notanotherceopodcast.com. We'll see you next week.